Donald Trump holding a lengthy and at times meandering, spiraling news conference from Mar-a-Lago. The former president using the opportunity to announce that he has agreed to 3 debates with NBC and with ABC and with his friends at Fox. He spent 64 minutes speaking extemporaneously and taking 41 questions from reporters. He slammed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and even Hillary Clinton. Trump also criticizing the media's coverage of crowd sizes at Harris's rallies. He also continued to spread false claims about U.S. elections and January 6th and, wow, so much more.
He had a rough debate, but that doesn't mean that you just take it away like that. I think she's worse than Biden. She destroyed San Francisco. In South Carolina, I had 88,000 people. In Alabama, I had 68,000 people. Nobody says about crowd size with me. But she has 1,000 people or 1,500 people, and they say, oh, the enthusiasm's back. I just hope we're going to have honest elections, that's all. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference. Nobody was killed on January 6th. You know, with Hillary Clinton, I could have done things to her that would have made your head spin.
It's like a jobs program for fact checkers. Trump said he doesn't have to do rallies on the campaign trail because he's leading by a lot. That's not actually the case. The CNN poll of polls, which is an average of reputable polling, has the race today tied nationally at 49% versus 49%. In the battleground states, the race is also tightening significantly. The Cook Political Report, which after the June 27th Biden-Trump debate moved a number of states towards Trump, today moved 3, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, back to toss-up status. Trump's only scheduled campaign rally this week is in Montana tomorrow. His Democratic rival, Vice President Harris, rallied in Wisconsin and Michigan yesterday, along with her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. She just spoke to the United Auto Workers Union in Detroit and is flying to Arizona later today, where she and Governor Walz will rally tomorrow. We're going to start with CNN's Kristen Holmes, who was just inside Donald Trump's news conference. Kristen.
Yeah, Jake, and that was actually my question, asking him why he's not campaigning, why it is that he's only doing 1 rally this week in a non-competitive swing state of Montana. He said he's leading by a lot, and I can tell you from conversations with his senior advisors that they know that that's not the case, that they're watching this very carefully. They are seeing the enthusiasm around Kamala Harris. They are seeing this boost from Democrats, and they are seeing movement in those poll numbers. All of that is something that they are watching as they are calibrating their campaign against Kamala Harris. Now, they are projecting optimism overall, saying that they believe at the end of the day this is going to be the same race over the policies that were unpopular under Biden, and now they're going to be unpopular because they are linked to Kamala Harris. She, of course, is at the top of the White House, the top of the administration where those policies were formed, particularly on immigration, on crime, and on inflation. But when it comes to this press conference today, it was clear moments after the press conference, a senior advisor came up to me and said, could Kamala Harris have done that? This was clearly part of the narrative that they have continued to say, that she won't take questions from the press. That is part of the reason that they decided to get reporters into that room today to have them answer questions from former President Donald Trump. And as you said, this was at times a rant, it was at times meandering, and at times really talking about some of Donald Trump's greatest hits, some of the things that he often brings up. It was clear, he was asked about the crowd sizes of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, that had gotten under his skin. He ranted about that incessantly, saying the media was unfair, they would never talk about how big his crowds were. And in fact, after he mentioned that January 6th had been a peaceful transfer of power, something he was questioned on by reporters, he was then asked to reiterate that, and he started talking about how his crowd on January 6th was the same or bigger than that of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. Clearly, again, very fixated on the crowd number here. But overall, the thing to point out of what is going on here, Donald Trump is trying to get out there. They are still recalibrating their campaign against Kamala Harris. They say it's the same campaign. They say nothing has fundamentally changed, but they also acknowledge this shift in polls, this shift in Democratic energy. And Donald Trump today, almost through his own actions, through his kind of fierce fighting back and defensive nature on certain questions about why he wasn't campaigning. He called my question stupid. What he thought about those crowd sizes. He got upset about that, saying it was the media's fault they weren't paying attention to. Clearly, this race has taken a shift, and Donald Trump has noticed. And I will tell you, it's not just Donald Trump. His own allies have told me they're worried about the campaign. They are worried about the direction that it is going in. They are worried that this is not ramping up enough ahead of November. He says it will ramp up after the Democratic convention.
I mean, for the record, Kristen, your question is the one that's on the minds of everybody, including Trump supporters that I talk to. Why is he not out there on the stump campaigning? It's a great question. Thank you so much for that report. Let's bring in CNN's Tom Foreman, who's digging into Trump's claims. Tom, it was a long press conference. I don't even know where a fact checker would even begin, but I hand you the floor.
It was a torrent of misleading statements and falsehoods. He said that that Kamala Harris was the border czar under the Biden administration. We were reporting, other news outlets as well, this way back in 2021. That was not the case. That was overinflating her role. In any event, he said the border was a giant collapse down there. He inflated the numbers that he says are coming across right now way beyond where they are now, and they've been declining. He also said something he said many times before, that other countries all around the world are emptying their mental institutions and their prisons into people who are coming across the U.S. border into the United States. Zero proof of that. We've never been given proof of that. He says it over and over again. He talked about the economy, big issue for many people. Said we're on the verge of a depression, not a recession, a depression. Absolutely not true. A depression, the Big Depression, 1920s, which he cited, unemployment then was 25%. We're at 4.3% right now, so not even close. He exaggerated the role that energy prices had in the economic downturn in this country, saying that it was bad management of energy. This is false. Gas prices were part of the equation, but so was the backlog of demand and supply problems related to the pandemic that led into it. So that's another thing. He threw in there, as he often does, that if the Democrats take over, they're going to force everyone to buy electric cars. No, that also is not in the plans. And on it went with many claims about this. But most of all, he kept circling around when he would come to one theme. If there was a theme, it was to say, well, Kamala Harris is somehow behind all of this. She's the problem with all of this. Through all of the falsehoods, Jake, I'd say the one truth we got is that she is getting under his skin. Jake?
Indeed. Tom Foreman, thank you so much. CNN's Caitlin Collins, David Chelling, and Jamie Gangel join me now to talk about the performance we saw. And Jamie, this was, in many ways, vintage Donald Trump on display, especially with this peculiar fascination with crowd sizes. Let's just run a little bit about what Mr. Trump had to say about that important issue that so many voters care about.
But on crowd size, in history, for any country, nobody's had crowds like I have, and you know that. And when she gets 1,000 people and everybody starts jumping, you know that if I had 1,000 people would say, that's the end of his campaign. I have hundreds of thousands of people. In South Carolina, I had 88,000 people. In Alabama, I had 68,000 people. Nobody says about crowd size with me. But she has 1,000 people or 1,500 people, and they say, oh, the enthusiasm's back. No. The enthusiasm is with me and the Republican Party.
Just a reminder of how the Trump presidency began. Here's then White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, Donald Trump's brand new press secretary, talking about his crowds at the inauguration back in January 2017.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
Here we go again.
Deja vu all over again. I mean, this is, you said something at the beginning of the show. Was this supposed to help? I don't think this press conference changed any minds. One political strategist who supports Kamala Harris texted me, I hope he does this every day. Ari Fleischer, normally a Trump supporter, tweeted, Trump should stop the news conference now. Time to get off the field. Earlier this year, we know Trump advisors were trying to sell the campaign as the new disciplined, on-message Donald Trump. This was not.
Donald Trump off the campaign trail, but on the attack as he struggles to slow down the growing momentum of the Harris campaign. Once again, the former president is leaning into some of his favorite lies about the 2020 election.
You don't win Alabama and South Carolina by records and lose Georgia. It doesn't happen. And the people of Georgia understand that. There was tremendous anxiety and problems in Georgia. A lot of people say, what happened? And we have to, all we want is honest elections. If we have honest elections in Georgia and we have honest elections in Pennsylvania, we're going to win them by a lot.
And joining us now, Democratic strategist James Carville. James, thanks so much for joining us. In addition to again questioning the results of the 2020 presidential election, he attacked the very popular governors of both Georgia and Pennsylvania, two key battleground states. What did you make of that?
Well, it was pretty typical, Wolf. I mean, the old bull was pawing and snorting, and he just couldn't stand being, that the vice president's in the limelight now. And what I took away from it, he couldn't stop talking about crowd size. I mean, the guy is just he just can't believe his whole world is crumbling around him. And he's just a scared, fat old man. And that's the way we should treat it.
Well, why do you think he's so obsessed with this issue of crowd sizes?
I have my own ideas, but I don't think they're suitable for cable TV. But that's his obsession. And maybe at some point they should say, sir, you've had the biggest crowds in the world. We're going to fit you with a nice, comfortable jacket and put you in a nice, rubber room. I mean, I'm being something, obviously. I don't know. But he keeps coming back to it. When his inauguration, he kept coming back to it. Remember, he had Sean Spicer go out and lie through his teeth. And here we are, 8 years later, and it's the same thing. There's something deep and really weird and really off about that this guy is still arguing something that's demonstratively and photographically untrue. He's now comparing it, says that he was bigger than Martin Luther King. I mean, next thing you know, he's going to give the Sermon on the Mount.
Harris and Trump have now agreed, as I'm sure you've heard by now, to a debate on September 10th. Harris says she has yet to decide on additional debates. How do you think she should approach that decision?
Well, first of all, what Trump says and what Trump does are two utterly disconnected things. And, they have the debate on the debate, or they're debating on September the 10th or whatever it is, so that's fine. And I'm sure in due course, I know better than 50-50 even shows up for that. He's just trying to do something to shoehorn his way into the news. And to sit here and watch everybody talking about him for a day, which they haven't done for a while, is all he's looking for. He's just trying to stay alive in the news cycle. I don't pay any attention to him saying that he's going to show up for the debate or not. I hope he does, but I don't know that.
We shall see. James, listen to what Trump also said about how important he thinks the issue of abortion access will be in the November election. Listen to this.
I think that abortion has become much less of an issue. I think it's actually going to be a very small issue. I think the abortion issue has been taken down many notches. I don't think it's a big factor anymore, really.
Is it less of an issue today? What do you think, James?
When's the last time a Democrat has lost an election? Since Dobbs. We have not. Literally have won every election.
I think we just lost our connection with James. Hold on, maybe he's back. Are you there, James? Go ahead. I think we lost it. All right, we'll fix it, James. James, thank you very, very much.
Joining me now to discuss, we have our panel tonight, and boy, is there a lot to get to. Stephanie Grisham, I want to start with you. You noted ahead of this, right? You tweeted out that he was going to speak to the press because Donald Trump was panicked. You believed he was upset with his campaign team, that he wanted to take control of the situation. So did he?
Yeah, I think he did. I think he did for an hour. I mean, everybody was watching. And as Kristen said, he was on all of the networks. And we're talking about it tonight. So certainly that's coverage that could be going to the Harris campaign and it's not. Now, the substance wasn't there. You know, I know that his campaign is saying that by and large, they think with immigration and crime and whatnot, that they're going to win on the policies. And the problem with that is he rarely talked about the policy. It was the same old tired Donald Trump spewing lies and just talking about, you know, what a victim he is.
So, Shermichael, to that point, it may have been a win in terms of Stephanie's right. We're here. We're talking about it. Yeah. Plenty of coverage on multiple TVs this afternoon. But in terms of hitting the real substance of the campaign, did you see any wins there today?
I mean, look, I think that's probably going to have to come talking to voters. I mean, I think the primary objective today was probably to disrupt the news cycle as much as possible. You know, a little recalibration, if you will, for the campaign. For the past 2 weeks, we've seen a considerable amount of coverage for Vice President Harris. Then with the announcement of Walz, that coverage has continued. And so if you're on the Trump side, you're looking at this and you're trying to figure out, how do we get ourselves back on an equal playing field in terms of overall media coverage to talk about our policy positions such as the economy, immigration, foreign policy? You got to first disrupt, then you can penetrate, then you can begin the process of having the conversations on the policy. That's the way I would view this as a strategist.
Mark, you just heard some of Kristen's reporting. There are Trump allies, Trump supporters who are concerned about all of this enthusiasm around Harris, more so than just punching through, right, as Shermichael was noting. Within the campaign itself, how much concern is there tonight?
I wouldn't say there's concern that they're expressing, but Donald Trump didn't get up today and do what he did because they're not concerned. And the reality is the body language of Donald Trump is communicating that he feels as if he's losing. That doesn't mean he's lost. That doesn't mean he will lose. But not only have the dynamics changed, but the trajectory of Kamala Harris is up. And Donald Trump's poll numbers haven't fallen, but they flatlined. He's sort of topped out in his ballot share. And so what he needs to do, and what he displayed today, is to try to really drag down Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. Now, as Stephanie just pointed out, the problem that he is having, whether it's in this press conference or at his rallies, is Donald Trump is no longer delivering a message that could be charitably described as cogent. He's not sticking to the issues. He's not saying immigration, inflation, Kamala Harris, immigration, inflation, Kamala Harris. It's all over the map. And when your speeches wind up being about everything, they can be about nothing, except the few things that become news are things you don't want to become news. Like, for instance, when he was in Atlanta, he decided to haul off and attack a fellow Republican, Brian Kemp, a popular governor of a swing state of Georgia, and that brought him absolutely no benefit. And increasingly, we're not seeing Donald Trump like the old Donald Trump, where he's really able to drive a clear message. Now, maybe all of this messaging stuff doesn't really matter. Maybe the race will sort and settle back out the way they say it will. But for the time being, the Trump campaign had thought Biden was going to be in this, and that if he wasn't going to be in this, that Kamala Harris was going to be easy meat. And both of those things have been proven to be very wrong, and now they're coping with the fact that they were wrong, and their guy right now is not performing.
It was interesting to hear him talk about the debates today, especially on the heels of Aisha, Donald Trump saying, I'm only doing a debate with Kamala Harris on September 4th on Fox, right? And then we saw the pushback from the Harris campaign. But it's interesting, too, even in that moment, how he uses an opportunity to call out Harris. Take a listen to this.
She's not doing any news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference.
So she told reporters tonight she's working to get an interview scheduled by the end of the month. Look, we have all been pushing for everybody would like to sit down with her. She doesn't need till the end of the month. She could get that scheduled in about 3 seconds with any reporter in this country. And I know you say she needs to sit down with someone. I'm curious, from that perspective, he makes an interesting point. Does she need to sit down for a substantive interview before the DNC?
I don't necessarily think so. And again, I don't work for the campaign, but I deeply believe in this campaign, and the strategists of this campaign know exactly what they're doing. Let's not forget, Erica, that this campaign really just launched a little over 2 weeks ago. In a matter of 15 days, Kamala Harris picked a vice presidential running mate, got the DNC to vote for her by ballot virtually, which is also unprecedented, to make sure that she was going to be at the top of that ticket, and is now going into a big convention. And is now moving around the country having massive rallies with constituents. At this point, there's a lot on her plate. And so it is not surprising to me, and I'm not disappointed that she didn't decide that her top priority was to sit down with the press. Now, of course, she needs to be asked questions, and she should come prepared to answer tough questions and have the press be able to have that forum with her. But the fact that it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen, is not something that concerns me. And in fact, I think that, it's great that Donald Trump just gets to stand over there and blabber, because the more he talks, I think the more America gets to know him, and it doesn't look good for him at all.
She did take a couple of questions today, we should point out, but should she take more, even if it's not to sit in a sit-down interview, be a little bit more open to those moments with reporters who are covering her?
Sure, I don't see any reason why she wouldn't be, other than the fact that she is doing something that no one else has done before in history, which is literally jump into a presidential race. Right now, it is 89 days left in this thing. I mean, there's so much on her plate that she's doing. And by the way, she's killing it, which is why you see the poll numbers going up for her, why you see millions of dollars being raised, and why you see the enthusiasm that's happening all around the country coalescing around her. That's why they're mad on the other side.
I was fascinated today that this came up again, right, and the way that it was handled. So, Michael, Donald Trump tried to argue that he was not the one who raised the question when he was questioning Kamala Harris's ethnicity. Take a listen to this exchange.
Because she's the one that said it. I didn't say it. So you'll have to ask her. To me, it doesn't matter. But to her, from her standpoint, I think it's very disrespectful to both, really. Whether it's Indian or black, I think it's very disrespectful to both. To me, it doesn't matter.
Well, despite saying in part 8 days ago that Harris, quote, happened to turn black, in his words, and now she wants to be known as black, Donald Trump now saying it's Harris who's being disrespectful, as you just heard. Michael, how do you work with that if you were advising the campaign?
Eric, if I had the answer to that question, I'd be the richest guy on this panel right now. Look, I think Senator Lindsey Graham was right when he said, I think on this network a couple of days ago, that this stuff isn't helpful. From a campaign perspective, you want to be able to pivot and draw the contrast from your opponent. I mean, you just talked with Aisha about why the vice president hasn't really sat with any journalist. If I were advising the principal, I would say, look, we need to bring the contrast about previous positions in the past to the flip-flop of new moderation today, and continue to talk about those issues, from police officers, from immigration, to health care, on and on. And you constantly bring that message before journalists. Eventually, the journalists are going to say, well, you know what? That's a good question. We probably should ask the vice president, why are you changing your positions? Why are you moderating? What's different now compared to before? And those are very substantive questions that I think a lot of voters would be interested in finding the answers to. But when you're not focused on those sorts of things, we're talking about this, and it's not helpful because it doesn't necessarily add to the voter pool. And that's always what you're attempting to do in electoral politics. You want to add, not subtract.
So it turns out that after backing out of a September 10th presidential debate on ABC, Donald Trump is backing back in. That was the main nugget of news in a mountain of ramblings at his press conference today at Mar-a-Lago. He now says he wants 3 debates, the other 2 on Fox and NBC. Vice President Harris late today said this about the ABC face-off.
I'm glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it, and hope he shows up.
As for the rest of the press conference, it was a very lengthy, very Trumpy affair, one that left a pro-Harris strategist telling CNN's Jamie Gangel they hope he holds one every day, and prompted pro-Trump strategist Ari Fleischer to tweet partway through, Trump should stop the news conference now. Don't turn this into the COVID 90-minute briefings. But like those briefings, the former president held court, held forth, and held the facts largely at arm's length or beyond, such as here.
We have a very bad economy right now. We could literally be on the throes of a depression, not recession, a depression. And they can't have that. They can't have that.
In fact, the economy grew by an estimated 2.8% last quarter and has been growing since the end of the pandemic. So no depression and no recession. Heck, the Dow Industrials were up nearly 700 points today. He also said this.
Look at what's happened to energy. Look at what's happened not only to their cars, where gasoline's gone from $1.87, and we had moments when it was below that. But it's gone from $1.87 to $5, $6, and $7.
So, keeping them honest, according to AAA, the nationwide average price of a gallon of regular is $3.45, and the highest is in Hawaii, averaging out at $4.68, not $7. He also falsely claimed that Democrats, if they win the election, will force everyone to buy electric cars, and did not mention that domestic oil production, according to the Federal Energy Information Agency, is higher than when he was president. It was growing when he was president and continued growing after he left office. As for how he left office, here is some of his answer to Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, challenging his claim that it was a peaceful transfer of power when he departed. And bear in mind, he began it by defending the people who attacked the Capitol.
No, I think the people that, if you look at January 6th, which a lot of people aren't talking about very much, I think those people were treated very harshly when you compare them to other things that took place in this country where a lot of people were killed. Nobody was killed on January 6th. But I think that the people of January 6th were treated very unfairly. And they were there to complain, not through me, they were there to complain about an election.
In fact, one of the attackers, Ashley Babbitt, was fatally shot trying to force her way toward the House chamber. 3 other people died of medical emergencies. In addition, Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who was attacked with pepper spray during the riot, died after suffering strokes the next day. The medical examiner found that Sicknick died of natural causes, but also told the Washington Post that, quote, all that transpired played a role in his condition. And about that day, the former president, keen as he was to downplay the horrific and, yes, deadly violence, made sure to make it instead about 2 of his favorite topics, himself and crowd size.
The whole thing, I had crowds, I don't know who's ever had a bigger crowd than I have, but I had it many times. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken before was that day. And I'll tell you, it's very hard to find a picture of that crowd. You see the picture of a small number of people relatively going to the Capitol, but you never see the picture of the crowd. The biggest crowd I've ever spoken, I've spoken to the biggest crowds. Nobody's spoken to crowds bigger than me. If you look at Martin Luther King, when he did his speech, his great speech, and you look at ours, same real estate, same everything, same number of people, if not, we had more.
Now, according to the House January 6th committee's report, about 53,000 people were on hand to hear Donald Trump that day. According to the National Park Service, Dr. King's March on Washington drew 250,000 people. Starting us off tonight, CNN political commentators from across the political spectrum, David Axelrod, Ashley Allison, and Scott Jennings. So, David, this Mar-a-Lago thing today, what did it accomplish?
Well, nothing necessarily helpful to him, I don't think. It accomplished something maybe for the Harris campaign. Look, I think, John, what's happened here is that they planned a very effective campaign against Joe Biden, and they may think of it as having won a campaign against Joe Biden because he's no longer the candidate, but they landed about 3 months early. And now they have a different race, and he's clearly freaked out about it. The reason that he went on and on about crowd size was because he's been watching these rallies of Kamala Harris, and he has crowd envy because she's stealing his act. She's got big, enthusiastic crowds. I also thought it was noteworthy, a couple of other things. One is he repeated this notion that somehow it was unconstitutional that she was the candidate. Because she wasn't the candidate in the primaries. I mean, she was running with the president. So I think he's laying a predicate here for claiming that somehow this is all illegitimate. If he loses this election, I think that's maybe what he thinks. But in any case, I leave you with this question. Look at Kamala Harris the last few weeks and look at Donald Trump today. And tell me who looks and feels like the confident candidate. It isn't Donald Trump. And that is a sea change here from the guy we saw in Milwaukee a few weeks ago who thought he was on his way to an electoral landslide.
It really was just a few weeks ago, which is remarkable. Scott, you were on CNN's flagship morning show, CNN News Central, and you said for Donald Trump, disciplined and on message will deliver the day. Undisciplined gets dicey. So was today more deliverance or diciness?
They have to focus on how they're going to frame the election. I think Axe is right. They had a plan to defeat Joe Biden, and the framework was basically strength versus weakness. They executed it every day, and they were winning that framework. Now the framework is apparent to any Republican, and that is radical liberals versus common sense conservatives. they have to prosecute that case in the same ruthless, focused way they were prosecuting strength versus weakness against Biden. It's not exactly happening every day right now. I would challenge Axe on one point about the confidence point. It's pretty confident to stand up and do a press conference. Kamala Harris is not willing to do that right now, is not sitting down to have her record challenged by any journalist. And I think that does show something of a lack of confidence. And if they achieved anything good today, it was to make the point. Trump is who he is, and he will stand and answer questions about his views, and she will not. I think this is part of a plan to try to draw her out, which they have to do.
What was discipline a word you would use to describe it?
Oh, it was 90 minutes. I mean.
So, Ashley, one of the things that came up again was how he, in his appearance before the National Association of Black Journalists, said that Vice President Harris happened to turn black. And before she said she was of Indian heritage. Of course, she's biracial and always has been and always said she has. This is what he said about it today.
Well, you'll have to ask her that question because she's the one that said it. I didn't say it. So you'll have to ask her. From her standpoint, I think it's very disrespectful to both, really. Whether it's Indian or black, I think it's very disrespectful to both. To me, it doesn't matter.
So obviously, he did say it. I mean, that's a lie. It was he who brought it up. He said it unprompted. And just to remind people, that was that. This is that moment.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
Again, if he keeps on repeating this, what can/should the Harris campaign do with this? And what do you think the Harris campaign should do with this appearance today in general?
Well, first on the is she black, I actually don't know if the Harris campaign should entertain him on that. They should continue to tell the story of who Kamala Harris is, a biracial and a person who is the daughter of immigrants, one who happens to be a black Jamaican and the other who happens to be an Indian woman. And that is a story that is resonant for many people in this country who are biracial. I think what the Harris campaign has been really good at is engaging folks on social media, because when I hear Donald Trump say it's disrespectful or embarrassing or whatever the word he was that he used, I want to say to who? I'm proud to see Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket as a black woman. And I know a lot of Southeast Asians are also very proud of her because of the history maker that she is. So let the communities protect her and let the campaign defend her record and identify her biography. In terms of this press conference, I mean, go ahead, Donald, keep doing it. Every day, go out there and remind us who you were in COVID when you told us to put bleach in your arms. Today, when you say, continue to say lies that are untrue and we will fact check them. I don't think it helps him get any new voters. I do think that the vice president, she came out, she answered a couple questions today, 2 days after announcing her vice president. And I do know she said she would get an interview on the books soon with mainstream media. So it's coming, but that contrast is very clear. And I think it's working for the Harris campaign.